Welcome to our second Science Friday of the season. For those of you who are familiar with Science Fridays, they take place the first Friday of every month, April through October, I believe, during the summer. And today we have CJ O'Brien with the Ocean Friendly Programs with Surfrider. So she is the Ocean Friendly Programs Manager at the Surfrider Foundation, where she manages the Ocean Friendly and Great Lakes Friendly Restaurant Program, which I'm really excited to hear more about. I've done quite a bit of work myself in the Great Lakes region with some of the other Surfrider partners, specifically on the Great Lakes Friendly Restaurant Program. She is also working to expand the program to other industries besides restaurants. Before joining Surfrider, she was the Plastics Campaign Associate at Oceana, working on policies that reduce the production and use of single-use plastics and helping both private and public industries reduce single-use plastic in their operations. CJ has a master's degree in development practice from Emory University with a focus on monitoring and evaluation and environmental conservation. I believe the way that we're going to do it, for any virtual questions, you can type them into the chat box on a rolling basis. However, for those who are attending the presentation in person, I have muted the classroom temporarily, and then I will unmute at the end of the presentation and we'll do questions from there. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to CJ.
Thank you so much. I will say I cannot see the chat, so I'll probably just wait until the end when I stop sharing my screen to look at the chat if folks do put any there. But yeah, just thank you so much for that introduction. My name's CJ O'Brien, and like she said, I'm the Ocean Friendly Programs Manager, and so I manage the National Ocean Friendly Program, but also the Great Lakes Friendly Restaurant Program. And I do want to note that I'm from Orlando, Florida, and live in Orlando, Florida, but I do help kind of run this program nationally. And a lot of these slides were created by the Surfrider Northern Ohio chapter volunteer coordinator, Dr. Laura. So if you have any further questions, there's her contact info and more info later in the presentation. So yeah, let's get started. So I first want to talk a little bit about Surfrider, our mission, what we're doing. I'm also going to go into, marine debris in the Great Lakes region and plastic pollution in general. And then, of course, talk about my favorite, which is my specialty, which is the Great Lakes Friendly Restaurant Program. So Surfrider's mission is that we are dedicated to the protection and enjoyment of the world's ocean, waves, and beaches for all people through a powerful activist network.
Oh, CJ, I'm going to interrupt you really quick. We're currently only seeing your like complete slideshow. We're not seeing it in the slideshow format.
Oh, so you can't see.
Yeah, so I don't know if you have like a dual monitor situation, but it is only showing like the slideshow setup. I wanted to let you know before we get too far in the presentation.
Can you see this?
I can see like all of your slides.
Weird. Okay, let me try this again. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I think if you click the little slideshow button in the bottom right-hand corner.
Okay. Do you see it now?
That's perfect.
Okay. That's so weird. It looks the exact same for me, but I think I just pressed the wrong
No worries.
button.
It literally happens to me all the time.
No
Okay,
worries.
go
Okay,
ahead.
well, so were you able to see the mission slide?
So we were not.
Okay, so this is the mission slide, and I know I went into detail about what our mission is. So yeah, there isn't much there other than a beautiful photo of dolphins playing. And then I want to go over kind of this powerful structure when I talk about this network of activists. So we really focus at three tiers. We have local issues that we work on, and that's really where the chapters come in. We have over 80 chapters all across the country, and they are really the best people to ask about local issues happening in their community that deal with ocean and lake protection. maybe there's a chapter that's doing a cleanup and they see a lot of polystyrene pollution. And so they are like on the ground, they see that, and they can kind of work to pass policies that then trickle into kind of national solutions. And so we have different regions where we have staff located mainly on coastal regions. We do have Great Lakes in addition to that. And then for national solutions, we have national programs. We work on national policy, but we also work on policy at the local and state level as well. So it's just a really cool model, and it's really powerful to talk with chapter activists and kind of see how that creates broader change. And so diving more deep into the network, we have 10 regions, over 80 chapters now, and then 130 plus student clubs. And that is consistent of over 50,000 activists. We have 50,000 members. Some of the members aren't a part of a chapter, but they, maybe donate or they are a part of our newsletter. And so these members kind of are all over the country and the world. And then we have so many supporters on social media. And so it really just all comes together to make a huge impact. And so the takeaway of that is that we need to come together to protect what we love. And this is a photo of Surfrider folks at Coastal Recreation Hill Day in Washington, D.C., where all of these chapter activists and regional directors and staff come together and lobby congresspeople on issues that we care about, and kind of talk about their story and what they're seeing at the local level and in their regions and how we can make change in Congress. So here's an awesome photo of some of the chapter folks in Northern Ohio. We do a lot of educational events, cleanups, which I'll get to later, but this was kind of an initiative to talk about reusables and plastic and provide reusable bags to the community. And so let's talk about the Great Lakes. So the Great Lakes have 4,530 miles of shoreline and 94,710 total square miles of surface area. And visitors to the Lake Erie region of Ohio spend more than $10.7 billion annually, about 30% of the total tourism dollars spent in the state. And these tourism dollars support more than 100,000 jobs, and this economy generates $750 million in state and local taxes each year. So not only is it a beautiful habitat and environment, but it does bring in a lot of money for tourism. It's an amazing wilderness for all of us to enjoy. But sadly, our oceans, lakes, and coasts are suffering a death by 1,000 cuts. We are dealing with drilling for oil. There is a wave of plastic pollution polluting our lakes and our coasts and our oceans. We have water pollution issues, and then climate change where we're dealing with erosion and sea level rise, and there's just so many issues impacting these spaces. And that's why Surfrider focuses on all of these different areas. We have over 100 active campaigns spanning across our different local chapters, and they focus on securing beach access because, without being able to enjoy the beach and enjoy these coastlines and spaces, it's really hard to want to protect them, and it's everyone's right to have access to the beach and to these spaces. So that's a huge area of interest for us. We also preserve our coasts, ensure clean water, protect the ocean, and then prevent plastic pollution, which is kind of what I'm going to be talking about the most today. So let's talk about plastic. And this quote from Life magazine in 1955 is really interesting. And this photo of just a rain of single-use plastic coming down, but it was quoted as, "Throwaway living promised a world of disposable items that would cut down on household chores." And plastic is a really transformative invention. It's helpful for medical devices. It allows us to be more safe when dealing with electrical wiring and seat belts and helmets. And it even allows us to ship things easier, and also helps us store food and keep food able to eat for a longer period of time. But the tough news is that plastic waste is everywhere. It's found even in our clothing. It's found at the deepest parts of the ocean in the Marianas Trench. It's even been found in snow, snowing down in the Himalayan mountains. It's just everywhere. It's on our beaches, on our coasts. I'm sure you've seen them on the Great Lakes. And they're also now microscopic. So every plastic product that has kind of been in circulation won't break down completely, but will just dissolve into smaller and smaller pieces. So it's really crazy that, you know, you look at that photo from not that long ago where plastic was kind of just coming into circulation, just being invented, and talking about how it's kind of going to change our society and our world. And it's just pretty daunting to see how it's so pervasive now, and it's everywhere. And this graph really hits home with that. And the amount of plastic that's generated is just so daunting. It really just outdoes any other sector within the industrial sector. And so I think it really points to how quickly plastic production has really ramped up, and how a lot of corporations and companies are really banking on plastic to be the next big thing, kind of has been for a while. And something I also want to talk about is that plastic is created from petroleum. So these petroleum and plastic production facilities are a huge emitter of greenhouse gases. And the same goes with incineration, which is kind of the act of burning plastic to dispose of it. And in 2019, the Center for International and Environmental Law estimated that production and incineration of plastic would add 850 million metric tons of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, which is equivalent to 189 coal-fired power plants. And by 2050, this could rise to 2.8 gigatons of carbon dioxide per year, or 615 coal plants worth. So, you know, when I was first learning about plastic, I didn't really know how ingrained it was in the petroleum industry, into how the production incineration of plastic was so tied to climate change and greenhouse gases. So I really just wanted to make those connections. And the crazy thing is too, is that, you know, with all of this production of plastic, the disposal of it is just not doing the trick. Recycling, as you can see, is really small. Incineration, you know, that is definitely not an ideal way to get rid of plastic because of the greenhouse gases and the fumes and everything associated with that. And as you can see, most of plastic is just discarded. And that's kind of where we get into marine debris. And so this graph shows the decomposition rates of marine debris items. So once a plastic item or plastic pollution is kind of in the marine or aquatic environment, this kind of shows how long it takes to decompose. As you can see, it's a staggering amount of time. And then as we've learned, a lot of times these items don't actually completely, you know, biodegrade or decompose, but they just break up into smaller pieces. And so if you go down, the single-use plastic items like a plastic bottle take about 450 years, and plastic beverage holders takes 400 years. And so let's get into more of the impacts of marine debris. So I'm sure all of you would, you know, when you see marine debris in the lakes or in the ocean, sometimes it looks like food for fish. I know if you see a photo of plastic bags and then you compare it to a jellyfish, it's so hard to decipher which one's which. And so ingestion is a huge impact of marine debris. And additionally, a lot of times on these microplastic particles, there's algae or like crustaceans or things that are growing on these items. And so it makes it really appealing to animals to eat them. And sometimes it blocks their digestion, or it might have toxic chemicals in it, and it can lead to killing the animal. There's also the issue of entanglement and ghost fishing. A lot of times marine life gets caught and killed in ghost nets, or they get trapped into fishing gear, or there's plastic rings or just plastic pollution in general that aquatic and marine animals can kind of get entangled in, and then they're not able to swim and suffocate and have a really horrible death. Another impact is hazard to navigation. So as you can probably just assume, you know, fishing gear, plastic can get caught up in propellers, and so it's really hard for boats and ships to to kind of navigate safely if there's a lot of marine debris. It also causes habitat damage. So if there's heavy marine debris items, this one shows a tire, it can crush sensitive habitat such as wild rice and other plant species. And it can also, leach chemicals. I know when I was going to school in Atlanta, there was a huge tire problem in the Chattahoochee River of people dumping tires, and it was leaching a lot of chemicals and things that we just don't want in the water. And then non-native species is one that a lot of people maybe don't think about, but when I mentioned that crustaceans and algae sometimes build up on microplastic pieces, there's also a lot of studies that point to the fact that marine debris can kind of act as rafts to carry non-native species from, one island to another, or different land masses, or to different places. And so it's a really interesting impact that I know I wasn't really aware of when I was first diving into this issue. And then lastly is economic cost. I know we talked about the tourism dollars that the Great Lakes bring in. And if you just think about, tourism and the fact that people want to visit these pristine and beautiful coasts and beaches and lakes, and if it just becomes littered with marine debris, a lot of people won't go there and there'll be a lot of money loss. But there's also a lot of cost associated with managing this waste and taking this waste and putting it in an incinerator or driving it to a landfill. And so there's just a lot of cost associated with that. I also want to dive a little deeper into microplastic. I know I've mentioned it a few times, but it's just so interesting to me to see what these pieces look like under a microscope. The foam one to me is always the worst culprit, polystyrene, because I know if you've used polystyrene, it just breaks down so easily. And so it's like a really good example and like a tangible thing to see how quickly and how small plastic can break down. I also want to talk a little bit about nurdles, because nurdles are little tiny pellets of plastic that are pre-production plastic pellets. So a lot of times when plastic is being produced in these facilities, they're turned into nurdles, and then from nurdles, they're kind of shaped into the other plastic products that we use every single day. And they're finding that there's nurdle spills in these areas where there's plastic production facilities like Louisiana and Texas, and I'm sure a lot of other places, but those are the hot spots. And so you see nurdles washing up on beaches, and it's really difficult to pick up, and there's not a lot of oversight or accountability of who is supposed to clean up these nurdles when they're spilled from those facilities. I also want to dive into what the top 10 litter items are that are found in the Great Lakes Basin. So if you look at this list, first is plastic pieces, which we looked at on the last slide. There's cigarettes and cigarette filters, and those have plastic in them, even though maybe at first look they kind of look like paper. There's those foam pieces that I keep talking about. There's bottle caps, food wrappers, straws, stirrers, cigar tips, glass pieces, other plastic foam packaging, and then lastly, bottle caps. And so if you take a look at that, most of it, if not all, is plastic pollution. And then if you look to the right on this graph, you just see that the litter composition is overwhelmingly plastic in all of these Great Lakes. And something I want to know when we talk about, that list in the last slide, the thing that really catches my eye is a lot of these items are single-use plastic. So plastic that is used only a few moments, is just used once before being thrown away. And it's really scary to me that, it's a product that's meant to last forever. When you look at the decomposition rates, it's hundreds of years that it could take it to break down. And then if you look at production, it's such a small period of time that we've been really pumping out single-use plastic into the market, but it's sometimes only used for a few seconds and then thrown away. And so I think it's really important to kind of talk about the shift from single use into reusables and having more longevity in the items that we use. And so I really just wanted to speak to the fact that we're mainly talking about single use plastic. So why does it matter? Well, we can't recycle our way out of this problem. I know I talked a little bit about that earlier, but as you can see, compared to the generation of plastic, recycling is just not cutting it. And so it is not our end all be all solution. Another thing to point out is that plastic pollution is a huge environmental justice issue. So I know I spoke about plastic production facilities and incinerators, and a lot of times those facilities are put in communities where there's Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, where there's low income communities, and they are seeing studies that there's higher cancer rates and asthma rates, and there's a lot of environmental justice components with that. In addition, a lot of countries, and including the United States, send their plastic to other countries to dispose of it. And a lot of times those countries, might not have recycling facilities, or there's a lot of informal waste pickers and they don't have proper PET. And so it's just a huge problem for environmental justice. Another thing is that it just doesn't it just breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces. It doesn't fully degrade. And we're seeing microplastic in pretty much every single aquatic, marine, terrestrial organism that you can think of. And then if you think about us, a lot of times folks are, consuming these species. And so that means we're also ingesting microplastic. So I also want to talk about the health and how that plays into all of this. So I'm sure you've seen in the news, there's so many studies coming out about how microplastic and plastic is in placentas, it's in our blood, it's in our salt, in our shellfish, in our drinking water. And there was even this study by Minnesota researchers that found microplastics in beer made with Great Lakes water. So, that could even be it's impacting our health, but also impacting businesses. And it's just this domino effect. And there was actually a study that says we eat a credit card's worth of plastic every single week. And that photo is just a great but terrible representation of that. So to us, the solution is simple. We must stop the flow of plastic at the source. So I'll get a little bit into Surfrider's Plastic Pollution Initiative. It is a multi-tiered approach to reduce the impact of plastic in the marine environment through advocacy, campaigns, and programs. Our ultimate goal is to eliminate plastic pollution at the source. So we have a bunch of resources, kind of how this ties into our advocacy work, campaigns. We do a lot of education too. So here's some great resources that I can send to people after this talk that dives more into the plastic problem. We, like I mentioned, we focus heavily on policy. This is another photo from Coastal Recreation Hill Day. And it's just really important that we have programs, we have advocacy, we have policy, because the data and the information we get from programs and we get with advocacy can be used to influence policy. So this is one of the policies we're working on at the federal level. It's called Plastic-Free National Parks, and the Department of the Interior recently came out with an order that they were planning to phase out single-use plastic in their operations, but that is on a 10-year timeline, and we've seen mention of them talking about bioplastics as a potential alternative. So we are urging them to move more swiftly. We're also urging them to promote reusables in their operations and make sure that they are focusing on like paper and bamboo rather than, bioplastic items that might look like or say that they're biodegradable and they're compostable, but really they kind of operate just like plastic unless they have special facilities to manage them. And I know that might not be accessible in very remote national parks. So if you want to scan the QR code, I can also send the petition that we are running. There's one for individuals as well as businesses if you want to help us kind of speed up that timeline. And we've had a lot of discussions with the Department of the Interior about this and kind of lended our expertise and knowledge. Another big one is, and this is kind of the golden policy on plastic pollution right now, it's called the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. It was introduced by Representative Lowenthal in California and then Senator Merkley in Oregon. And this hasn't been reintroduced in this Congress yet, but it has been introduced in the past 2 Congresses. So we've just continued to build support, and we do anticipate that it will be, in fact, introduced, and we will be able to lobby and have petitions ready for you. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about it because it's a really good representation of kind of the structure of how local, regional, and national all come together really well. So the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act takes kind of success stories from the local and state policies and puts them into one big package. So it will strengthen environmental justice by putting a moratorium on plastic production facilities to kind of assess how it is impacting communities that are near them. It'll test and reuse and refill programs, so providing incentives and opportunity for small businesses and big businesses to test, reuse, and refill programs so that we can scale them up. It will also hold companies accountable for products and create transparency. So if there's a company that's creating this plastic product or using it, that they, are either paying or they know what's going to happen to it end of life or have a plan. Because if you go to the grocery store right now, almost everything is in plastic, and a lot of them are weird shapes, they're weird compositions, and a lot of times those can't be recycled, and there's really like nowhere to go or people don't know where to put them. So we need to have that accountability for companies. It also incentivizes good design. That kind of pertains to my last point, and just making sure that there's streamlined products that can in fact be put in recycling facilities so that there's just standardization. It also requires real recycling. So like we saw in those graphs, the recycling rates are just not cutting it. And so we need to make sure that real recycling is happening. We're not, shipping it or incinerating it, and that we're actually being able to have infinite amount of uses from some of these items. It also reduces the toxics in plastic. There's a lot of chemicals associated with plastic that leach into our food, especially when they're heated up. And so it really puts standardizations and makes sure that plastic doesn't have some of those toxics, including PFAS, which is a big one. It reduces pollution, it reduces single use, which I talked a lot about, and then it forces us to manage our own waste and not ship them to other countries. And then now to the program side. So we do a lot of beach cleanups, and here's some awesome photos of Great Lakes chapters cleaning up and doing data collection. And so when we have these beach cleanups, we have a huge database that kind of shows, okay, how many straws are we picking up? How many pounds of trash? And it's really helpful in influencing policy. And it's just a really good, educational tool to show people, hey, this is what we're finding. This is why we need to advocate to reduce single-use plastic and hopefully create a world without plastic pollution. I did want to point to our impact with the cleanups. So we've been tackling this issue for over a decade, and we've hosted over 2,000 beach cleanups. 650,000 pounds of trash have been removed, and over 100,000 volunteers have been engaged. So cleanups are such a good way to foster a community, to just learn about this issue and come together to tackle it. And that leads me to another program within the Plastic Pollution Initiative, which is the Great Lakes Friendly Restaurants Program. And this program recognizes restaurants that are committed to cutting out single-use plastic in their operations and creates a really clear criteria and guideline for how to do that. And it's really cool to see in these photos, the restaurants span breweries, they're juice bars, they're coffee shops, they're even food trucks. We have cafes that are located in hotels. We have dining halls that are situated in universities. And so it's a great community, and it really shows society and legislators that a plastic-free future is possible and that it isn't impacting businesses, and that businesses can thrive by reducing their amount of single-use plastic. So something I do want to mention is that the Great Lakes Friendly Restaurant Program was kind of created out of the Ocean Friendly Restaurant Program. And so if you hear me talk about Ocean Friendly Restaurant Program, that's just because right now we have almost 400 ocean-friendly restaurants, and our Great Lakes Friendly Restaurant program is really just getting started. So this came from a huge need from our local chapter saying, hey, we need to change the messaging on this program to be Great Lakes Friendly Restaurants rather than just ocean friendly. And so it is growing, and it's really exciting. And if you see ocean friendly on materials, just know it's because that has been the program since 2013, and this new program has really been taking off and growing. So what does a restaurant need to do to become a Great Lakes friendly restaurant? So they have to follow all of these 7 mandatory criteria, and it mainly focuses on reducing single-use plastic. So they're required to only use reusables when dining in. So if you go to a restaurant, there can't be any of that single use when you're dining, in the restaurant, with waiter service and things like that. You have to make sure that you have reusables. There's absolutely no expanded polystyrene or styrofoam used for takeout or dining in. Paper straws are only offered upon request. And so I know for me, when I go to some restaurants in Orlando, people give you, 4 straws, even though you don't necessarily want them. So we think it's really important to only offer paper straws or bamboo straws, or reusable straws upon request only. And it's really interesting because there's been some studies that show restaurants can actually save money by doing this, because if you think about it, they're using less inventory, they're not handing out as many straws, and so it's really good for business, but also good for our lakes and coasts too. They also can't use any beverages that are sold in plastic bottles. There's no plastic bags for takeout used, and they must follow proper recycling practices. And finally, single-use utensils, straws, condiments, and accessory items are only upon request as well. Additionally, they can choose at least 3 of this optional criteria. And this criteria kind of dives more into the holistic aspects of being an ocean friendly or Great Lakes friendly restaurant. And so they choose 3 of these. The first is to offer a discount for customers with reusables. So really providing that incentive for people to bring their own mug, especially for a coffee shop. There's the vegetarian and vegan options. No single-use or bio-based plastic containers are used. I talked a little bit about that with the Department of the Interior order, but it's becoming a huge issue because there's so many products out there that, claim that they're compostable or biodegradable. And so we have a foodware guide that helps them kind of see what is greenwashing, what items are good to use. And so one of the optional criteria is that none of that stuff is used, especially with takeout, because I'm sure you see it in a lot of takeout, there's plastic or that bio-based plastic. And then prepackaged items are not sold in plastic. Energy efficiency efforts are in place. Composting efforts are in place. Water pollution and conservation mitigation efforts are in place. And finally, all seafood is best choice or a good alternative as defined by Seafood Watch. So a restaurant has to follow 10 criteria, 7 of them are mandatory, and then 3 are optional. And if a restaurant meets all of the mandatory criteria and all of this optional criteria, they are deemed a platinum level restaurant. So I want to talk a little bit about our impact. And so right now, like I mentioned, we have 370 restaurants, almost 400 and counting across the country. And by doing some calculations, those restaurants serve about 65,000 plastic-free meals every single day. It's just really exciting to see this, plastic-free, like having that experience in a restaurant, to have a plastic-free meal and do it at such a large scale. I think it is really influential on changing society and hopefully influencing government. And it looks like the words got knocked off here, but this is the University Dining Hall at Texas A&M, and there's also UC Berkeley, which just signed up all of their dining halls to be ocean friendly. And so I would love, if you know of a university or school, to urge them to become a Great Lakes friendly restaurant too. So what is in it for the restaurants? If they become a GLFR and OFR, what do they kind of get in return? So it's a free membership that's good for 1 year. They get window stickers, brochures, and bill inserts when they sign up. They can use our logos for their menus. I've seen a lot of OFRs have the logo at the bottom of their menu, or they even put in their like the bill inserts, and it's a really great way to kind of show off that you're being more sustainable and making those choices. Additionally, the restaurants listed on the Surfrider National and chapter websites, and they're also included on the map that's on our webpage. And so you can kind of see that at the bottom right. It shows all of our restaurants across the country, and it's very easy to kind of, pick the zip code or kind of look, oh, if I'm visiting San Diego, you can kind of see what ocean-friendly restaurants are there. And so that's a really great marketing tool, but also a good resource for people that want to prioritize eating at restaurants that reduce single-use plastic. There's also opportunity for launch parties, collaborative promotions. There was a chapter recently that partnered with a restaurant where they were selling a vegan French toast, and for every vegan French toast that was sold, a percentage went to the Surfrider chapter. And so it's a really great way. There was a ton of news media. It was even like on the actual televised news about this. And so there's a lot of opportunities to do things like that while also giving back to the local chapter. There's also access to national vendor discounts on sustainable restaurant and to-go products. So we have some discounts for products that are only available to our OFRs and our GLFRs. There's also an opportunity for a tax-deductible donation if a restaurant chooses to, and they're just associated with a nationally recognized nonprofit with thousands of members and millions of social media followers. So it's just a really great way to get your restaurant out there. So how do you join if you know of a Great Lakes or a restaurant that could potentially be a Great Lakes friendly restaurant? So all they have to do is go to our website. There you could also go to surfrider.org/OFR, and then you can scroll to the bottom and click Great Lakes, but it's all the same form, even if it says ocean friendly restaurants. And so they will fill out this easy form. It should probably only take 5 minutes. And then the owner or the manager will receive an email to confirm their email address. And then they are a Great Lakes friendly restaurant. So what happens after the restaurant joins, or maybe they have already been a part of the program and it expired after the 1 year, so they have to renew. So what will happen, once you receive that confirmation email, you're good to go. You receive a welcome email saying when your membership starts, and then you get a package in the mail that has the welcome letter. It has a window stickers that you can put in your restaurant. It has a bill insert and some OFR signage and a brochure just so you can get more information. They're featured on the map, like I said, and on chapter websites. Chapters can post about them on social media. A lot of chapters do that, when they get a new GLFR or OFR. They say, hey, we have a new restaurant. And then every month I post a spotlight on an OFR, GLFR on our national blog. And a lot of times, that gets picked up in our newsletter or it's featured on other blog posts. And so it's a really great marketing tool. Another important thing is that because it's a year-long membership, we urge our chapters, and we really focus on this, to do compliance checks at the restaurants just to make sure, they're following the criteria just like they said, to go in and provide any assistance, if they were following the criteria and then there were supply issues with the straw they were using, and so now they're using a plastic one, we can kind of work with them to come up with solutions. And it's a really good way to kind of foster that relationship with restaurants. And so all restaurants are subject to compliance checks. And I know some restaurants, might not be approached by a chapter and they just find the program and sign up. So it's good to make sure that they're legit and they're following the criteria so that we can make sure it's an impactful and strong program. And then we make sure to email restaurants 2 times before they expire and then 1 time after they expire, just to make sure that they renew if they want to. So before I end, I just kind of wanted to really bring it home of the importance of programs and advocacy and all of these different local actions and how they can really influence local, state, and federal policy. So this was an activity we did at one of our chapter conferences where we talked about individual actions people can make and how it all comes together to, end with plastic pollution is eliminated, because it will really take all of us and all of these different actions to come together. I also wanted to talk about, a real case of how cleanups and how the Great Lakes Friendly Restaurant and Ocean Friendly Restaurant program can come together to make real change. So recently, the New York City legislature, they passed a Skip the Stuff bill, which means that, those utensils and straws and those types of items are only able to be provided upon request across New York City. And you can see Surfrider staff is testifying, and they actually used cleanup data. And we also had OFRs, come and testify and talk about their experience with doing the Skip the Stuff. And so it's a great testament to that work and how it influences policy and change. So I think it's so important to remember to protect what you love. And I want to talk about what you can do. So if you scan this QR code, it goes to Surfrider's webpage. It's important to just stay positive, stay informed, choose reusables. You could even do a plastic audit in your household and kind of assess where you can make small changes. It's also important to be civically active, exercise your voice, go to these meetings, testify if you can, talk to your local officials or even your Congress people, and you can join a beach cleanup. You can get involved with the Surfrider chapter, and make sure to follow Surfrider and Surfrider Northern Ohio and sign up for the Making Waves newsletter, which will talk about, what campaigns they're working on, what events they have going on. And yeah, just get involved as much as you can. And there's this beach cleanup. I apologize if that's not close to you all at all, but I just wanted to plug it in case you have the opportunity to go. But Surfrider chapters are always hosting events and cleanups, so it's a really great way to get plugged in. And I just want to thank you all for your time. I'm sorry that I couldn't see anyone to answer questions, but I'm happy to take those. And I also wanted to point you to the volunteer coordinator who provided a lot of these slides, who's so knowledgeable about the area in case you have region-specific questions. And then, of course, if you have questions about the Ocean Friendly program, the Great Lakes Friendly program, or any other plastic questions with Surfrider, please feel free to reach out.
Amazing. Thank you so much, CJ, for all of the information. If anyone in the classroom has any questions, I'm going to go ahead and unmute the classroom and kind of just feel free to shout them out. Let's see. Why won't you unmute? Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you, Janet. It let me mute you, but I couldn't unmute you. So does anyone present have any questions?
What's the localist chapter in Ohio, Northern Ohio?
Oh, CJ, you're muted.
I was gonna say, I think it's the Northern Ohio chapter, but I can double check for you.
Yep. But we do have a Northern Ohio chapter, and I've actually had the pleasure of working quite a bit with the Northern Ohio chapter directly. So it's really exciting, at least from a coastal training program perspective, to hear from CJ kind of from the regional and national planning perspective. And I do have a couple of questions. Do you know if any of the Great Lakes colleges are Great Lakes friendly restaurant campuses? Because that was something that, when you're talking about expanding industry from just like your regular standalone or chain restaurants, that was something that I was like, oh, I didn't even consider that. We have so many, universities, and obviously that's a really kind of quote unquote progressive microcosm where I could see that taking off.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And There's only right now 2 universities and colleges that have ocean-friendly like dining halls, and none of them are in the Great Lakes region. So it's just UC Berkeley and then Texas A&M. But I've been working closely with our club network because I know there has to be clubs, you know, in the Great Lakes region that might be interested. And so we've really started to kind of talk to them and be like, hey, it's just like a restaurant. You know, it's the same criteria. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. And it seems to be a need. I know a lot of universities and colleges have been signing break free from plastic pledges or have kind of acknowledged that they need to reduce their use of single use plastic. So it's absolutely a huge movement within that space. And so, yeah, I agree. I would love to expand that. And if anyone has experience or connections with that space, please let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. We work with tons of universities on obviously things like wetland research and water quality monitoring. So I think that would potentially be a low-hanging fruit for partnership, although obviously not discounting the effort it would take to get, a university there. And then my other question was, how often do you encounter businesses that are pretty much already meeting the criteria? They hardly have to make any changes, if any at all, to quote unquote claim themselves as a Great Lakes friendly restaurant.
Yeah, I would say I don't have like an actual quantifiable way to know because a lot of this outreach is, driven by chapters.
Mhm.
But what I've heard and when I talk to restaurants is a lot of restaurants are already there, but it's always like one item. Like they're so close and but there's just like one thing. Like usually it's the straw. And I also see it as being very region specific. So in places like California where there's a lot of policies that require, restaurants to do skip the stuff or to not have polystyrene, like that helps restaurants kind of already fit the criteria. And so for me, like living in Florida, I see a lot more restaurants that don't follow all the criteria. There might be 2 things that they just need to tweak, but in different like different regions, it varies. I would probably say maybe a little less than like probably like it's a 50-50, because a lot of
50-50.
restaurants that have heard about Surfrider or know about the program are kind of already aware of single-use plastic and have made those changes, but it's awesome too that we can kind of provide those resources and
Right.
help them make the change.
And that's kind of what it seems like. There's a lot of, which is a good problem to have. There's a lot of duplicative efforts
Yeah,
and, skip the straw campaign, or people kind of create their own plastic free or plastic reduction campaigns. So I think, if it's something as simple as directing them to the Great Lakes Friendly Restaurant certification, and especially for a lot of like our local citizens who, for example, are in the room right now for Science Friday, and mentioning this, campaign to some of the people in the local area, and asking whether or not they're aware, because that's just an extra marketing boost for these businesses.
yeah, absolutely.
Has any effort been made to contact marinas in the Great Lakes, the Interlake Yachting Association and yacht clubs?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we have a few restaurants that are kind of located within a marina. I know that there's Sailors for the Sea, which is associated with Oceana. They do a lot of clean regatta work and they have incredible toolkits on how to make like their yacht club or their like sailing event plastic free. And so we've worked with them. We've been on a few panels at the Sailing Association to kind of market this program. But I think you have a really good potential industry of like targeting yacht clubs specifically because I imagine the criteria would be the same with a few tweaks. But we definitely have been talking with restaurants like within those spaces. So that's a really good suggestion or
Yeah,
and
and
question.
I was going to mention that there is a pretty decent partnership, like with the Ohio Clean Marinas program and some of these marine debris associations.
Hmm.
We've hosted a couple workshops in like pre-COVID times that were focusing specifically on those spaces, because you have that nice integration of, fishing and boating debris. And then also, yep, there's, restaurants and bars within yacht clubs and marinas,
Yep.
etc. So, yeah, I mean, I think again, kind of cinching all these threads together is a really exciting initiative.
Yeah, and I mean, I know I've been to marinas or yacht clubs where you're literally right on the water and they're using plastic, and like if there's just the smallest of gust, it's gonna go into the water. So I think it is so important. And a lot of times those folks are just they get it because they see the lakes or the ocean every day. Like they see that impact. And so yeah, I think it's so important. Like you said, kind of bringing those threads together is important.
Do
Are
we have
there
any? Oh, go
movements
ahead.
to re-put on, lost the word, but where the bottles are returnable and you get what you've got, deposit. Which I would think, well, as a kid, that was a source of income. Picking up bottles. And if we could go to the deposit on most of the plastic containers, it would take a lot of that plastic out of the lake.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I should have mentioned that as one of the types of policies where Surfrider works on. And so a lot of states, there are a few that have bottle deposit systems. We're working in a few states to expand existing bottle bills to make it stronger because a lot of times it's like a 5-cent return. And so increasing it to 10 and kind of incentivizing that is really important and kind of reducing the amount of loopholes that there are. But then we also advocate to implement a bottle return system. And then in that Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act that I mentioned, that's at the congressional level, there's a national bottle bill in that. And so there's definitely a need and an awareness within like Surfrider and the plastic community that's kind of advocating for these types of policies that bottle return systems do have a place and they are important to implement. So yeah, I think that's a really good question.
Emily, are you involved with the Northern Ohio chapter?
Oh, yeah. So that is, I mean, is Sarah Dameron technically, I mean, I know that she represents a lot of the Northern Ohio. I don't know if she's technically the chapter lead, but that's the Surfrider contact that I've been in most contact with. And we are listed on the NOAA Great Lakes Marine Debris Action Plan with them. So we've done, kind of partner workshops where we're talking about everything from fishing line recycling to skip to straw and then to things like certification with the Great Lakes friendly restaurants. So I'm really, COVID obviously was a really tough time for everybody, but particularly on the restaurant side of things, because a lot of restaurants unfortunately closed because of that. And we actually did a needs assessment shortly. I mean, it was actually still during COVID times. I think it was 2021, but it was shortly after the shutdown of everything, where we were specifically talking about the cost savings, where we focus on the word reduction if we're not purchasing single-use condiment packets or tons of take-up boxes that are styrofoam or obviously straws and things like that, and looking at their budgets and seeing how much money that they can save. So I'm really excited for this conversation to kind of kickstart again, because again, COVID unfortunately caused it to kind of plateau a little bit. But yes, I am looking forward to partnering more. And again, I think the more local involvement and even just like word of mouth, like, hey, this restaurant, is already doing XYZ, it would be really easy for them. They might already be technically a Great Lakes friendly restaurant, but they're just not in touch with the program coordinator.
Yeah,
The
something that
the Maritime Museum in Sandusky is partnering with the Great with the Great Lakes Foundation, Lake Erie Foundation. And they're putting together a plastics display, and I think the opening is tomorrow. Is it?
Oh,
Okay, tomorrow. So I think the Great Lakes, Foundation, or Lake Erie Foundation, is another place to hit strongly.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, good to know. I wasn't aware of that opening, so maybe that would just be a good networking point. Again, where we're talking about there's all these amazing organizations where we're working towards the same or similar goal, and the more that we can tie in our efforts together, I think the further we'll be able to go with them.
Are there any brochures about this Northern Ohio Surfrider organization around?
I could send a bunch of resources. Emily, would you want me to send them to you or Jen? But I can send their webpage and just how to get involved. If that would be
Yeah, if
helpful.
you want to send a follow-up email to both me and Jen, and then we can make sure that we share, via our email list, and then we could put on social media as well. And then Rosie, if we are interested in like print resources, we can easily print those off and make them available at the visitor center. Okay, let me see. Oh, and then there's 2 minutes left, but we just had our Ohio Clean Marinas coordinator join, so I wonder if she's gonna yell at me for for calling her out. But she's in the chat as well, and she's another wonderful local resource. So that is, when we're talking about yacht clubs or any restaurants internal to the marina program, she's another wonderful resource. I'm gonna go ahead and allow her microphone in case she wants to come off real quick.
Hey, Emily, thank you. Sorry.
Hi, sorry for calling you out, Sarah, but I was literally just talking about your program, and I thought that might be good to introduce you real quick.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Happy to help and be a resource. Anything that intersects kind of environmental stewardship and recreational boating, which includes marinas and yacht clubs and boat clubs. Happy to help. I'll put my contact info in the chat. Thanks.
Perfect. Okay, we have about a minute left. Does anyone have any last minute questions for CJ, either regarding the Great Lakes Friendly Restaurant Program or just marine debris, especially in the Great Lakes in general? Okay, hearing nothing, we'll go ahead and conclude this month's Science Friday. Thank you so much, CJ, for taking the time to talk about marine debris. And it's always really important for us in the Great Lakes region to kind of refocus on marine debris, because a lot of the times people think of sea turtles in the oceans, which are obviously very, very important. But kind of neglect to realize that this is very much a Great Lakes coastal issue as well. And reflecting back on some of those graphs that you showed, the concentration of plastics is highest in these more shallow Great Lakes, with Lake Erie and Lake Ontario being the highest concentration. So we really appreciate you taking the time and bringing a little bit more focus to our little Great Lake.
Thank you. It was awesome. And please reach out anyone with any questions or if you want to get involved. Yeah, it's been awesome speaking with you all, and have a good rest of your day.
You too. All right. Bye.
Bye.